Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 13.
In this episode, Daisy's going to share something with us. Daisy, what do you have today?
Well, Terry, I have an episode from a podcast that you got me into. It's the Mindvalley podcast with Vishen Lakhiani.
Nice.
And I've really been enjoying it. He's a really nice guy, isn't he?
He is.
He seems very genuine and humble and all about just getting information out there to people. It's really his goal in life. I like him a lot. I'm liking him more and more the more I see of him. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan.
Great.
And this episode was called Why There Is No Good or Bad in the Universe with a woman called Emily Fletcher. And she is a meditation expert. She has a course on Mindvalley. I think it's called the M Word. And she also has a course on her own website, Ziva Meditation. And interesting aside here, she actually is offering it for free to health professionals at the moment during the pandemic. And I mentioned it in KKB and a few people have signed up for it already. I'll put a note in the description. So anyone out there who's a health professional, you can sign up for free. Seemed like a really nice thing to do. It sounds like quite a good course and something that would be a great thing to do if you're in a very stressful job. She also has a book called Stress Less, Accomplish More, and lots of meditation videos on YouTube. It was quite a short podcast, quite a simple central idea, but it really spoke to me. I liked it a lot. It comes from the Vedas, apparently. The main thing that it's all based around is this. What if there was no such thing as good or bad, right or wrong? What if there was only creation, maintenance, and destruction? And then obviously she goes on to talk about what she means by this. Basically, it's a cycle that everyone and everything goes through. Creation, maintenance, destruction. Starting with creation. When you lead with creation, innovation, you're starting something new. Nature supports it and everything flows. You like the results of this. And so what we tend to do is try and stay in that place and repeat what we know. And the place you get into is maintenance. Creation gets put on the back burner. We convince ourselves that maintenance is like a safety zone. But the problem is that maintenance is quite a dangerous place, this sort of ever repeating nature of it. And she says, once we start leading with maintenance, we're waving the flag of irrelevance for destruction to come through and clean house. And that's the next part of the cycle, which is destruction, which she calls a correction part of the cycle. And it clears the way for creation. Your first response might be to look at destruction as being a bad thing. But she goes back to this theory that nothing is inherently good or bad. It's just part of this cycle. It's either creation, maintenance, or destruction. And we're always in one of these places. And actually, destruction is a good thing because it's just clearing the way for creation to come in again. When you think about it, this cycle is happening all the time. It happens in our bodies. It happens in nature. It's happening everywhere. And she says that the unifying thing is energy in nature. Energy is either creating or destroying, expanding or contracting. And I really like this idea of this flow around this cycle. And she does say, though, that this leading with creation, first of all, she's making it sound like it's this fantastic place, but she says it is, and you get nature's support. But of course, it can be painful. The problem is that we're afraid of that pain. And that's why we get stuck in maintenance, because we convince ourselves that it feels safe and we get in this cycle. She calls it the ever repeating known. the ever-repeating known is dangerous because you're waving this flag of irrelevance. Everything starts to stagnate and you just become irrelevant. And correction has to come. And that's when destruction comes in to clean house, to make way for creation again. And the other thing she spoke about was karma. And I really liked what she had to say about it. She says that the karma tends to be seen as a kind of payback or a cosmic bank account where you basically get what you deserve, whether that's good or bad, whether you're banking points in your cosmic bank account, or, you often see, don't you, when someone's done something, someone else will say, well, karma's going to come along and take care of that. But her view on it is this. She talks about darma, which is your life path. When you're creating, the road ahead is like a wide highway. It's this beautiful, smooth, paved highway, and you're flowing along it towards your hopes and your dreams and your goals. When you start to veer off this path, you start to lead with maintenance. This is karma. She says what it is, it's like when you start going off, if you just sort of lose focus when you're driving along the motorway, and you hit the rumble strips on the edge, it just sort of wakes you up. And she says it's not there to punish you, but more of a course correction to take you back to Dharma, which is the place where you're in this place where you're creating. It's a place of creation, compassion, generosity, sustainability. She talks about it a bit like an alarm clock. An alarm clock is unpleasant. No one wants to hear the alarm clock in the morning. You'd much rather stay asleep. But it gives you the opportunity to wake up and change actions. This is where she's talking to get back on the Dharma path. The trouble, and it's something that's really coming up to the surface now, when people are stressed, they're in fight or flight mode, they tend to get angry with each other and combative. And she said, we all just need to get back to our Dharma, back to our life path, and back into this cycle, creation, maintenance, destruction. It's definitely something that I feel that I've done. It's something that you see with people, say big figures on social media or something, where they're in this period of creation and they're putting lots of content out there, and then they kind of just sort of, stop moving forward, stop involving themselves in that process of creation and kind of stagnate a bit. And then inevitably it's followed with this waving the flag of irrelevance, so that destruction has got to come in and clear the way. So I liked it. I liked the theory. The only reservation I had about it, which she sounded like she was going to start talking about, and then she sidestepped it and didn't get into it, and I would have liked to hear what she had to say about it, was what happens when bad things happen? What happens when destruction comes in too early? When you're in that creation phase? Things came to my mind, like she mentioned several times pregnancy being creation. And I thought, well, what happens if you have a miscarriage? There's no maintenance phase. There's no stagnating there. There's no irrelevance there. It's just creation in full flow, and then destruction comes in. And there's no sort of cycle to it either, or it didn't seem like that to me. So I would have really liked to hear her address that. But for other things, I thought it worked really well. For work, for relationships, for friendships, for all sorts of different things you do in life. Your approach to your health, to exercise, to diet, to all sorts of things. So I thought it was very useful for that.
It really makes me think about when you share something like this, I always try and think about kind of the philosophy or the theory, and then think of examples or how it works. So it makes me think about how that theory or concept fits for me, and then also some examples of it or new ways of looking at life based on it. And so as I was listening to you describe that, I was thinking about one of the things it seems to speak to is the idea that maintenance, I think in some ways we've been taught to think of that's a good phase. that creation is the early beginning part, and sometimes it's scary and it's unknown. But once you reach maintenance, that's where things are going to be okay and feel safe. And really, this way of looking at it makes me think of seeing maintenance as complacency, and that is leading to the destruction of whatever it is. Like you said, the relationship, the career, or whatever, that when we become too complacent, we open up the door for destruction because, as you said, we or whatever becomes irrelevant and newness needs to come back. That creative energy needs to come back. So it made me have to quickly think about, in what ways have I looked at maintenance as the goal?
Mm.
And really hearing this, thinking maybe maintenance isn't a place to hang out too long. That even in what we traditionally might think of as maintenance, so let's say, for example, with weight loss, once you reach goal, that maintenance doesn't just mean staying at that weight forever, but that you have to have new creation come into how you do that so that you don't become complacent.
Yeah, and I think, because I was just thinking about that when I spoke about the different areas that it could apply to and how you can see it being really good for something like what you do for work, for example. But then I was thinking, when we talk about weight, we talk about maintenance in some ways as being the goal. That's what you're wanting to get to. You're wanting to, say, if you're wanting to lose weight, you're losing weight, but your goal is to get to your goal and then to maintain it. But yes, I think there is something about the idea, and I think maybe something about there's a lack of excitement in some ways to maintenance. Anyone who's struggled when you're talking about weight, anyone who's struggled with it, like I've always either been losing or gaining, and there's a emotional charge to it. There's something about it, whereas maintenance is almost that sort of boring bit. So I think thinking of it relative to that is, bringing in that creative aspect to it and switching things up and changing your focus and thinking about other ways to be creative. But I just like this general principle of creation and moving forward and being innovative and creative. It's something that I've just been thinking about. It's been cropping up in more and more podcasts, and I've been thinking about it more and more. And when you're in that frame of mind, when you're in that mindset, that seems to be, when good things are happening. She says nature's on your side and there's flow, and it does seem to feel like that.
Mm-hmm. The other example you posed has me really thinking about, it's actually a challenge that I have with a lot of theories or concepts, in that I think oftentimes when we attach to a theory or concept solely to then apply another example, suddenly it doesn't work, or it makes it sound like a negative thing. And what I mean by that is, it reminds me of when I first, years ago, the book, when it came out, The Secret, about the law of attraction. And I was a psychologist at the time, and I remember so many of my clients loved that book and they were getting so into it. And a couple of them came in very upset by reading it because they said, based on this belief, my cancer diagnosis is my fault. I created it. I brought it into existence. And so I really struggled. For a long time, I didn't recommend the book. I worked really hard to kind of soften the message that I think some people were taking from the book. So I think in your example, what about when bad things happen?
I couldn't resolve that. And I get into that place where, because I have a very logical mind, if it doesn't work for this example, it kind of, then it undermines the whole thing and kind of makes me want to throw it out. But of course, that's not right, because it makes sense in a lot of other ways.
And think about, even you and I have talked about this outside of recording, but how different topics that we've talked about here, how they overlap. If you live according to one in all exclusion of the others, it doesn't always fit. So you have to have other concepts and other approaches that weave together. And so when I think of when something bad happens, before you've even gotten to a place of maintenance, So let's say I'm going to start a business and I get the location, I order all of the supplies, I hire the staff, and in the first month of being open, a pandemic begins that makes the business totally undoable. Then someone might question, wait, this isn't how Daisy said it was going to work. I'm still in the creation mode and I didn't open the door yet for destruction. Why did it come in? So for me, I have to look at some other beliefs to kind of make sense of that. And the idea that if it didn't get to its full point of fruition, it wasn't supposed to. It wasn't the final thing. There's something else. Maybe that business that I was starting wasn't going to be what was best for me or for the world or whatever. And so the energy of the creation was a positive thing, but now there's something else coming, even though it's following destruction. So now I need to do something different. I need to take my ideas and my energy in another direction. And so when I look at it, it's not that that point of destruction ruined everything. It stopped that creation to open up the next level of creations.
Yes, that definitely makes sense. It's kind of, it's a hard thing to come to terms with when you're talking about something as monumental as a life, I guess. That's where I really struggled with it. I guess it was because she actually mentioned it, and she says, I don't want to downplay the pain that people go through with bad things. But so I really wanted her to explore that. And when she didn't, I felt kind of a bit let down. But I really did like the theory, and I really liked the Dharma karma thing with the course correction, the wake up call, with karma sort of prodding you with when, something goes wrong, and it's not that it's trying to punish you. It's just a bit of a wake up call that you need to change your direction back to that original path that you were supposed to be on.
Or to a different path. I think sometimes destruction can also help us see creating this path was very important, but it doesn't mean it's the path I will always be on. And so that openness to, is there a different path that takes me to the next place? So maybe destruction wasn't only to get me back to the original course, but also maybe it was to help me find my next course of creation. Think about how many entrepreneurs, they lost their business, the stock market crashed or whatever. And when they rebuilt, it was completely different. They went in a very different direction. And so it's still to keep that energy going. I think the other thing for a lot of us, like you said, having a more kind of logical approach to things, is we want an equation.
I was going to say it's that black and white thinking, isn't it?
This amount of creation, then this amount of maintenance equals destruction is here. And so when destruction comes early on in the process, that defies that equation that you're trying to build to make sense of this concept, versus in whatever this is for anyone, whether it's a higher power or the law of the universe or whatever, sometimes when things don't go according to our equation, doesn't mean we did something wrong or we're being punished or whatever people tend to think at that place. It may just be there's a bigger answer that we don't know or see yet. And that's why destruction is coming early in the process, because that certainly doesn't fit the equation that she described.
Yeah, that works. Vishen was talking about his own experience with building Mindvalley. And he said that was right. He said he kept nearly, I think it was 3 years in a row, he was nearly bankrupt. And he said it was only when they completely changed the philosophy of the business and he really got it into his head what that path was supposed to be, that it was all about the education. It was all about improving the education of the universe. You know, it wasn't about selling programs. When he put the right priority first, everything started to fall into place. And I think now he turns over hundreds of millions. So he said it was just, and that was karma just prodding him over and over and over again. Course correct, until he got it right.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a old country song about this, but basically, you know, sometimes you feel that your prayers weren't answered, and it's not that they weren't answered. They weren't answered in the way you were framing them. But what he described, and I think I've listened to him talk about at some point, his main business partner or someone like absconded with money from them, did all of these things. And it would be so easy at that point to say, I'm failing. I'm doing the wrong thing. I've chosen the wrong path. I need to abandon it. And instead, it was just giving him the opportunity to stop and reframe and refocus and redefine what he was doing, hone in on his value more of what he was trying to bring to the world. And I think that's what her philosophy really is about, not being stopped by the destruction and not falling into the complacency of maintenance, but to allow yourself to continue to be in that cycle of create, maintain, destruction, create, maintain, because that's how we continue to grow and evolve.
There you go, see, I knew you'd make sense of it all. And I knew you'd sort out those niggles.
But it's funny too, because like you bringing that up, that has been my complaint about things. This is going to sound stupid, but it's even as simple as when people say, oh, what's your favorite meal? I don't like saying what my favorite meal is because, well, it depends. Do you mean my favorite breakfast? Do you mean my favorite dinner? Have I eaten the day before? Have I not eaten? Because my answer is going to be different. And so many theories and philosophies and questions, we act like there's one right answer. And so when I listen to these podcasts or read a book, it's like, okay, it's got to be this way. And then I start thinking of examples where I don't really believe that way fits. So there's got to be another way, you know, like I just said, it's not just one way. There are 20 ways the world works, or 1,000 ways the world works.
Yeah, exactly. And you bring them all in.
How will I weave them together? And and how will I trust that? Because I think for some of us, if we get so locked into, I believe it all happens this way, when something goes wrong or doesn't pan out, we don't really have anywhere to go but to say, well, actually, this theory sucks, or I suck.
That's a good point. That's the thing. If you fall in love with a theory or whatever it is, and it makes complete sense to you, and then someone points out or something comes in, some little niggle comes in that seems to pull it apart, what are your choices? Oh, the whole theory sucks and we need to throw it out. Or I suck because, you know, I believed in it. But actually it's neither of those.
And I think even if you got to hear her talk more, and you're going to find this in other areas too, you're going to hear her start to talk about something else that really bridges into another concept or theory, that taps into another concept or theory. So she's not saying this is our only way of seeing life. These 3 things, and it all revolves around this. But if you understand this concept, you're going to make sense of life in probably more helpful, productive ways.
Absolutely. So it's interesting, I think, that we've come back again to reframing. And I like how her theories that she spoke about in this podcast are a way of reframing things. You know, reframing destruction as not being a bad thing, but paving the way for creation, for new things starting to happen. And I liked how you've reframed the niggles I had with it, and how that undermined how previously I'd really liked her theories, and then, because I'm not sure about this, I now have a problem with it. And you've managed to completely reframe that for me. So yeah, thanks for that.
So bravo for us.
I've learned something again. So I feel a little bit like I've had a mini therapy session. But that feels like a great way to start my week. So I hope you and everyone out there has a great week too.
Thanks, Daisy. I hope everyone can take this and really just embrace the 3-part of the cycle that you talked about in a really positive, healthy way for them. Have a great week.